I want to talk about Hillary Clinton's emails yet again, but I want to talk about it from the perspective of Joe Biden floating out some information, really talking about what his presidency would have looked like. And then today in Politico and in The Hill, there was an article about Joe Biden talking about he would have picked Elizabeth Warren to be his VP pick. The reason I want to talk about that is because a lot of people feel that this is and when I say a lot of people, I want to say some liberal commentators feel like this is Joe Biden and the DNC floating Joe Biden as a possible substitute in case there is an indictment of Hillary Clinton. Now, what are the odds of her getting indicted? I don't know. I'm not putting any money on it, right? Contrary to what James Comey said, he said that there's no amount of privilege that anyone, no matter their position, there's no privilege. If they're under investigation, they'll get investigated like everyone else, and the results will be the results. That's what James Comey said in a Political piece earlier this week. I personally don't buy into that. I think that the more someone is vested in a system, the higher up they are and the more dependent more people are on that person. I think that you will find that an investigation would slowly but surely disappear or take long enough to no longer be relevant. That's just my personal opinion. I don't have any anecdote. I don't have any data to back it up. I'm sure somebody has a research paper somewhere that probably confirms my biases. That's just my expectation. So I fully do not expect Hillary Clinton to be indicted, not because I think she's innocent, but simply because I don't think that they will let an email controversy bring her down. That's just my two cents. So if I had to bet money on it, I wouldn't think that she was going to be indicted simply because of those reasons. I do think some people are above. I mean, hell, we still haven't indicted anyone. No one has gone to jail over the crash of Wall Street, the Great Recession. So there are people, let's be real, there are people who are above the law. I think Hillary Clinton is, to a certain extent, above the law. Now, if I'm proven wrong, I've been proven wrong before. But here's the whole point. There are a lot of people who believe that this indictment has or this investigation could potentially lead to an indictment because of the amount of feelers that Joe Biden has put out this week. I was watching a video and the Young Turks talked about it tonight. A couple of people, outlets are floating this idea that you see Joe Biden now back into the mainstream because the Democratic establishment is floating his name, putting out the feelers today with he and Elizabeth Warren as a means of prepping the population for the eventuality that Hillary Clinton would be indicted. Now, this is something that has been talked about. I haven't talked about it because, again, I think Hillary Clinton, to a certain extent, is going to be treated as though she's above the law. So I am not expecting an indictment, for one. And then two, let's see what actually happens with the emails. Fine. Let's put that to the side. However, it makes total sense from a political perspective that if you have dug yourself into some shit, and with Hillary Clinton being under investigation, there is the possibility of some deep shit to come out of this. If you find yourself in that type of situation, then it only makes political sense for you to start putting those feelers out there for someone that you would rather support than Bernie Sanders. The DNC has shown itself to be completely against the economic populist message of Bernie Sanders. That is established. I mean, and that particular assertion really trickles over into the conversation about the white working class, right? There is, in my opinion, the Democratic Party has shifted and morphed into being the party of the economic elite. The Democratic Party has morphed into being the party of the economic elite, and not just the white economic elite, but the black economic elite and everyone else economic elite, the Democratic Party, because if you are economically privileged, right, and you are not a social bigot, then where do you go? You don't go to the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is stuck on stupid, and they may have the economic policies that someone who makes $1 million a year would prefer, but they don't want to align with an imbecilic party that is hell bent on taking us back to the 50s in terms of social issues, in terms of race issues, right? So they're not going to go to the Republican Party. And so over the last 30 years, there has been a transformation in the Democratic Party that has taken social issues that are progressive, and they've tried to merge it with economically conservative policies. And this is where we have things today. And the DNC is vested in that particular voting block. The DNC is vested in that voting block, and so they are doing everything they can to stifle the economic populist message of Bernie Sanders, which is why they would rather float the idea, in my opinion, if there is trouble on the horizon for Hillary Clinton, I would agree with some of the people who have covered this ad nauseum. This is my first time talking about it. It has been talked about plenty of times, but I would agree that the DNC would opt for Joe Biden with the conciliatory prize, the consolation prize. Well, conciliatory is also pretty accurate in this kind of conversation, but the consolation prize of Elizabeth Warren. So because all of this is in the air, right? This is what's going around the social webs and the interwebs rather, and the mainstream media. This seems to be the subtext of this week is that Joe Biden is now back in the conversation. And so we'll keep our eye on. I mean, that's really all we can do. James Comey came out this week, and it's just, I agree. Nothing is coincidental in politics. I don't believe that there's any statement that's ever released. If they're smart politicians, let me preface it with that. If you are a smart politician, then there is no statement that you ever release that is not intentional. And there is no reason for Joe Biden to be talking remotely about how good of a president he would have been, or who the VP would have been if he had run, unless it is very intentional. So I think that is a pretty fair theory, for lack of a better word. But we'll see. It would be some very interesting times. Of course, I don't think a single Bernie Sanders supporter, or at least not a significant percentage, would take that lying down. I mean, to completely circumvent the voting process and to opt for a Joe Biden for the protection of the DNC and the establishment against an economic populist message, that would not play well for Democratic politics. I think that's a guaranteed way to split the party finally and have a an independent run. Maybe that would in itself be enough for Bernie Sanders to really say enough is enough. I can no longer support the DNC. So it's all speculations at this point. However, I will say again, anytime you see messages like this being floated out there, it's nothing just happens. Every press release, every statement to a reporter and a journalist is intentional. And so whether or not Joe Biden's statement was intentionally trying to float his name back for the purposes that we're speculating, it does have a very specific purpose other than Joe Biden running his mouth. And now, with me saying that last sentence, it has dawned on me as I speak that Joe Biden is one of those politicians who does open his mouth and just says shit, right? So we have to calculate that in there too. So you know what? And this is a shame. Like, it might be a flip of a coin on this one. This could very well just be Joe Biden running his mouth, right? Because that's what Joe Biden does. And that's some of the reason I like him, is because he just says whatever the hell comes to his mind. But I still think it's just I think it's reasonable to make some of those speculations and to sit back and see how this plays out.